This is episode 16 of On the Move. Today, Ben and I sat down with clinician and rancher Ricky Quinn. We got a chance to talk to him about the program he helps to run at the Lazy U at Olson Farms and a little bit about his journey and what he's done to develop himself as he tries to grow as a person and where he's going from here. So I didn't know Ricky previously, so it was really nice to get to meet him. I'd heard a lot about him, and he was a fun guy to talk to, and really fortunate to spend some time with him.
Yeah, I think fun's the key word. We really had a good time, and anyone that knows Ricky, um, and anyone that doesn't, I think you'll really like this. But I think we captured a little bit of his personality and heard from him. Uh, you know, hanging out down there at Robbie's, so kind of some downtime, and that I really enjoyed that because I've been hearing about him forever too.
Absolutely. Um, Probably one of the things I appreciated a lot about Ricky was he was pretty open about um, his character flaws and what he wants to work on and what he's been working on as kind of his life journey has gone through. But you can tell he's pretty introspective. He thinks quite a bit about what's going on and how he's responding and how he's setting up things for the horses and the people around him. Um, and that's pretty awesome to see someone who thinks that deeply about it, because there's a lot of people who maybe don't put that level of thought into what they do, and so obviously that's a big component of being successful at whatever it is you're pursuing, is having those kind of deep mental conversations with yourself and being honest with yourself. So that was cool to hear from him.
Yeah, I liked hearing what he said about the way he kind of runs. Well, at least the part that he's involved in the Lazy U or the Olson Farms. He doesn't sound like a guy who would be your typical corporate guy and consumed with quarterly earnings and making the corporation be first as much as the employees. And it seems like that's something he's come up through the ranks into. Like he really has an understanding of what young people go through to try to get better, or people that don't even know that they need help, or they know they need help, they don't know where to get it from. Like he's real mindful of that. So with the employees, helping them. And I think he said when people come there, it's not about what can you do for the ranch, but what can I do for you guys so that when you move on to the next job, you're equipped to offer them something better. And yeah, just that attitude of giving and not wanting to take. And obviously that probably is working out for him for the better.
Yeah, no, I think it is for sure. So, well, without further ado, here is episode 16 of On the Move with Ricky Quinn. Enjoy, you guys.
Are we recording?
We are, but what we
We
do
we are, but we're gonna
is
take all
we
this
just
out.
chop it out.
I was gonna say, oh shit, this isn't good.
This is all gonna hit the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like, well, here you go. Yeah,
Yeah, we tried to get some stuff a buck
yeah.
last weekend and we just couldn't hit record fast enough. We didn't get any of that juicy stuff, so kind of
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then he's
You,
very aware once we turned the recording off, and then it was like, now let me tell you what I really think.
heck yeah.
exactly.
Well, anyway, Ricky Quinn, welcome to the podcast. I know Joe and I we've been hearing about you forever, so um we're glad to have you. This is great.
Yeah, thank you very much. I enjoy doing these, so this will be fun.
Yeah, it seemed like it. I mean, I appreciate the way you hopped right on board because Joe and I, boy, to us, this is the funnest thing on earth. Who cares if anybody listens even? To us, the chance to get to talk to different people, it's the best. And kind of look forward to it every week.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys have done a really good job with it. I've listened. I haven't been able to listen to all of them, but I've listened to a few of them, and yeah, I just like the style of it. You guys are both very well spoken, especially for your ages, because I hear you guys aren't very old, really. And I thought, man, those guys they're really together for their age. They do good. And Ben, you use some great words. You come up with some words that I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Well, I appreciate hearing that.
Smart guy. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know though.
Yeah, that's good.
Joe kind of holds it together. He's the guy with a degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I use it to start fires and
Well, you can only
I
do
don't know.
that so many times now. Now, if you got into
Yeah.
smoking something out of that paper, you might could get a few more uses
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah.
Don't do it all at
Make
once.
sure there's
though.
not too much ink on it.
Yeah.
Dude, I
The
was
ink will
thinking
be
about
bad
that
for
the
you.
other day. I don't even know where my diploma is right now. After this last move, I'm not sure I know where it is. It's probably in my garage somewhere.
What did you major in?
I have a degree in industrial engineering.
Oh wow, you are a smart guy.
I got the paper to prove it, man.
Yeah, you don't know where it is though.
No,
So
yeah.
you really don't. You can't prove it.
At one point, I had the paper to prove it.
Yeah. He just tossed it
Yeah.
all away and said, "I'm following the horse."
Yeah, I've got a PhD.
Yeah, a post hole digger.
That's exactly right. That's again, I can dig straight walls on it and everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
It wasn't it irritating. You ever dig a postal with somebody and they can't clean the sides. They keep going for the center. And so you use the tamper with the digging in. You say, here, you empty the hole, and they can't clean the hole. So then you switch. You say, you do the tamping, and then they don't dig the hole out wide enough for you to even clean a straight hole. So next thing you know, you just kind of dig the hole by yourself, and they're like one of those guys that work for DOT.
Exactly. Hey, I lost you on my computer.
Oh, me?
Yeah, that happens with Ben sometimes.
Okay.
We can all hear
They
each other.
they just got internet in Georgia like a year or two ago, so his internet's not the best.
Bunch of toothless hillbillies.
Yeah.
They're behind.
But the good thing
They
about
just
this,
stopped using Confederate money, so they're slowly getting there.
yeah.
You guys still have slaves though, don't you?
Well, there's a certain element
Ricky,
that's
there's
trying
a
to bring
very
that
fine
back.
line with that humor.
There's a certain element we're
funny.
trying to bring that back, but we're trying to spread it out. It's trying to like equality. So we're thinking about trying on a different
That's right.
demographic this time, and we're trying our best. We're all getting behind Raphael Warnock, and we're going to see what we can do.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Good for you
Yeah.
guys. Good for
You see why we have to edit a lot of this crap out?
Well,
we'll cut
I'm
all
trying to
this
get
out,
you
of
guys to
course,
say
but-
some nasty. Yeah, I'm trying to get you guys to say some shit that's wrong too, so it's not just me.
Yeah. No, I think we're counterbalancing all right so far.
Yeah. But no, Ben's internet does go in and out, and so it's like the way this works is it prioritizes the audio quality over the video quality. So if the audio gets below a certain level, it'll stop your video to preserve that audio quality. Yeah. So
And it prioritizes the people, right, Joe? You and I stayed on, and he went away.
Yeah.
But I'm still here. Hey, and I may even come back at some point. And the other cool thing it does is it saves all of our audio and video to our laptops and then uploads it afterwards. So in the end, when we go to make this thing, we have great video and audio of everybody in the last stage.
Yeah, because sometimes yours will get. Yeah, sometimes yours. Mine's really clear. I'm guessing because it's on mine.
Exactly.
But yours will get blurry and cut in and out, and Joe's. Yeah. But it doesn't do that when you have it all saved, huh?
No, it takes a little while. And actually,
cool.
You brought it up. That's perfect. When we get done, you don't want to close your page down. You just leave it open. After you exit, and then it'll tell you when it's done uploading to the internet. That way because that happened. I don't know if you
Okay.
listened to our podcast with John out there in Washington. Is it Idaho? Wherever they
Idaho.
are, Land Grove Coffee Company. And
With
he
Yeah,
cut out
where
with
too
John
Ricky.
early,
Benninger lives.
and he shut off his
Oh
computer.
no, I didn't. Nope. Nope.
Okay, but he did that, and it wrecked a bunch of the stuff. Not his fault or anything, but his computer got shut off, and then it wrecked a bunch of
Gotcha.
that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, cool.
Are you
So
drinking Benninger coffee right now?
no, I'm not. I'm drinking. It's like the
That's bad.
Keurig brand. Well, so Miss Nancy. Well, so Bill and Nancy. So she's the best when it comes to shopping. She loves to buy some nice things.
Yes.
And so the
Yes,
other day
she
she
is.
was
She's
throwing
good
out a
at it.
Keurig machine, and I asked her, I said, "Hey, does this thing work? Because I'll put that to use." And she said, "No, that one doesn't work, but I'm ordering a new one. I'm ordering the biggest one they've got, and you can put that down in the tack room." So I've got that, and I've got a box of
Oh, nice.
100 cartridges. So I don't need to buy coffee for a while. Shout out to Nancy.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Heck yeah. Yeah. She does like to shop. She does.
are you a coffee guy, Ricky?
Amen.
Kind of a gay cut, but yep.
Are those?
Yep. I think this is Benninger coffee too.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Nice.
Is that flowers on his antlers? On that cup?
Yeah, that's kind of weird, huh? Yeah, it's kind of
It
weird.
looks like something you'd hang
That's
over
a
like an arbor at a wedding or something like that.
I know. It probably was hung on that arbor at the wedding.
yeah.
Yeah,
To be honest.
that looks like an
That's-
Andrea cup.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So here's something I want to ask you about, Ricky. Word on the street is you're pretty. You can turn your hand at quite a few things. And really, the only thing I knew about you before I called you was Joel Connor one time told me the story about how you guys were gonna like working at McGinnis Meadows, and you guys were gonna build yourselves a bike on your day off, and how it
Yeah.
kind of escalated way beyond being a bike.
Yeah. Yeah. My mind can kind of run off.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he wanted to. He wanted to. What was he wanting to do? Build like a go-kart or a bike or something that had a motor on it, and he tells the story way better than me, but it ended up being like a Volkswagen Bug engine with a, I don't know, but it was going to work. I mean, it was going to work, but I have a tendency that when I get an idea going, that I end up making it way bigger than what the people around me wanted it to really be.
Oh, gotcha.
So, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did,
I can't remember all the details to it, but um, he's told that story a couple different times.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I can definitely relate to that. Because I'm definitely a person who, like, once I kind of buy in 110%.
Yeah.
And then you can almost like alienate the people around you if they're not bought in at the same level. Have you ever found that?
Yeah, you find that, and then that's where the salesmanship kicks in, and then they feel like you're selling them something,
Yeah, like, hey,
because you're
you should
trying to
care
get
about
everybody
this.
on board.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to get everybody on board with this new idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to be careful with the salesmanship because that can kind of end up being a little bit dominating because you kind of want your way to work.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have absolutely run into that.
Yeah, I bet.
I was listening to an old interview with you, and you were talking about when you sell a horse, sometimes even people say, "Man, Ricky, you even want to sell this horse?" And you were saying because you want to
Yeah.
be honest. You're not trying even a horse. You're not trying to be a salesman about it as much as you are honest and let the
Yeah.
horse show off what he can do. Make sure they know if there's anything funky about it.
Absolutely. Ironically, just a couple days ago, there was a fella that traveled from Wyoming to come and look at some yearlings, and he, I I heard that he was there, and so I went over to where the horses were, and Leah and Anna, who worked for the place, were showing the horses off, and I just kind of stopped by to say hi more than anything, and I just started kind of talking to the guy and asking what he's interested in, and he showed me some horses and that he liked, that he picked out, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "What are you going to use the horse for?" And he went through his his list of things that he wants to do with the horse. And I said, "Well, that one there is okay, but that one there actually has crooked front legs. I don't know if you noticed that." And it was his favorite one, the one with the crooked front legs. And he looked at that and he followed that horse for a round, and he came back to me and he goes, "That horse has crooked front legs." I said, "Yeah, it's enough that I think doing what you want to do, I think it'll get in that horse's way, as far as the movement that you need." I said, "Sometimes I wonder why I tell people and show them that, right? I mean, that was the favorite. You were going to buy that horse from us. Some people would just let that sale happen, right? And then the people get it home, and then they ride the horse a little bit. A friend comes over and says, 'Did you know you bought a horse with crooked front legs?' And then a lot of times the buyer doesn't necessarily take that responsibility on with themselves, right? And then you got to be careful with that, because then maybe they talk negative about our horse program as if we jammed a horse into them, said it was something that wasn't. You never know. So really work hard to be honest with all of that stuff the best I can, because it's not that I'm necessarily fearful of something negative coming back. It's the right thing to do. And so that customer, and I said, "Well, for me, you're probably right, as far as selling these horses, but what I would like you to be is a repeat customer, and that someday you can call me on the phone and say, 'Ricky, this is the type of horse I like. We've bought horses from you before. I don't want to travel that far. Pick two for me that I would like, and stick them on a trailer and send them.'" That's the kind of customer that I try to create in our program, and we've got quite a few of them that are that way. Robbie being one. Robbie sold a bunch of horses for us, and he just says, "Just pick. It's so and so. This is the type. Pick the right one," and I do, and then I send the horses to him. And I've got a couple other people that are that way too, and so that's why it's about the long haul. It's not about getting, your few $1,000s for a horse one time. It's about the long haul and the reputation. And so, but I have to be careful. I have to be careful, because sometimes my honesty can come across wrong, and it can kind of offend people too. So I really have to be careful
Yeah.
of how that honesty comes across,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. So my dad and my family, we've got a seed stock operation here in Virginia, and we have a annual bull sale and everything. And he he says almost verbatim what you just said. It was one of those things where you have to be honest with people, and really be more focused on creating relationships than making a sale that day, because
Yep.
that's what makes a sustainable business, especially something like that where you're selling horses, selling bulls. So, yeah,
Sustainable business, sustainable relationships, sustainable marriage, to be able to be
absolutely.
sustainable for yourself,
Yeah,
right? Being honest with yourself. Yeah, a lot of that. Yeah,
yeah. Truth will set you
absolutely.
free.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You guys are
That's
selling quite a
awesome.
few horses too, right? I mean, you're running. How many horses do you run there at See Lazy U right now?
When I first, so the operation's really neat operation. It's really all in the same. Some people will call it Olson Farms. Some people will call it Lazy U, right? So the Lazy U is really the horse program side of it, and Olson Farms is really the ranch, right? Olson Farms is where the paycheck comes from, right? And so really kind of how the whole operation works is, to give you some numbers to give you an idea on the scale of the operation. So we'll feed, there's three different feed yards. We'll feed anywhere between 40 to 50,000 head of steers. Um, I it fluctuates so much on inventories, to where when I first came there, they had just shy of 3,000 head of mother cows. Right now on the books, there's about 500 mother cows. We've run anywhere from 6,000 head of steers out on grass, to this year it was 3,000 head of steers, based on weather and the whole thing. And and we run about 100 broodmares, give or take, and I think we have 12 or 13 studs. um, there's there's got to be pushing over 40 people on the staff now as far as employees on the whole operation to make the whole thing work. There's 15, 16 people, um, that I would say in the horse program, is as far as whether they ride pens at the feed yard or they work at what we call the steer head where the arena is, and the steer head helps me with all the. My responsibility is really, to help with the horse program, to keep it organized and help the workers, right? Whether it's, um, getting them to where they learn more and have more education on how to handle livestock, or help plan the day based on how the whole operation flows and how it all intertwines. And so we raise those colts, and we'll have, the 100 brood mares, you'll have about 80 colts a year, give or take, depending on the year. So we'll have 40 fillies and 40 stud colts, and we'll sort those down. And like right now, we've already made our first sort, but we'll end up sorting those down to where we sell about 30 head of each gender on the end of the lead route as yearlings. And then we keep 10 head of what we think is, I'm not going to say the better end, because a lot of the horses that we sold are good too, but I sort a lot on the mindset and the shape and, confirmation and a lot of that, where I really, to where they fit our program more than anything. And then with all of our colt starting is now in house. All of our horseshoeing is in house. All of our dental work is in house. The majority of the vet work is now in house, and we get those horses going as Robbie comes and helps. Uh, I bring a crew in, December, November, December. They come in, they get them all started, the twos, and then they get on the threes that they started last year and help roll them forward. And then I've got a guy hired that keeps going on to them into their 4-year-old year, and then he takes them and he rides them in the feed, 3 different feed yards with the crew to help get those horses acclimated to that environment and the job and gets them rolling along. And then he passes them on to the employees who ride the feed yards. And everything, all the horsemanship is based on Ray Hunt, Buck Brannaman, if you will, right? Joe Walter, like this style of
Yeah.
horsemanship. And so that's the idea behind the program, is everybody's chasing that mindset when they're working the horses. Because a lot of feed yards, um, they don't. There, a lot of feed yards I've been to and I've seen, one of the areas that has really struggled is for the feed yard, as far as quality and class, is the pen rider side of things. They ride horses into the ground. They're sore. They're hard on them. Um, it's not good. And so we're not like your normal feed yards. Like these horses are, they're really top end type horses. They're big, strong horses. They're metallic cat, once in a blue boon, smooth as a cat. Like the breeding is really good on them. It's not your just average $2,000 sale barn horse, right? That's 15 years old and they just force him into the yard. These are younger horses that have got a lot of power and a lot of mind and emotion to them, and then helping these, um, the employees learn how to get through that and ride them. And we rope in the yards and a lot of roping outside, and I mean everything, that we learn in the horsemanship and that kind of thing is just applied in that area. And so that's pretty much what I do, is help the owners to manage that. And then a little bit of what I do too is I go into the feed yard side on helping with, whether it be death loss on cattle, trying to ferret out why we're having those problems, whether it's feed driven, whether it's weather driven, whatever it is. A lot of stockmanship stuff and helping the employees get along with the cattle a little bit better and how they present themselves to the cattle, and all the way down to just help employees get along with each other, right? And understand the managers who are telling them what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
are you are you kind of overseeing the whole deal then? Like those 40 employees, are you at the top, or are you
No,
overseeing the horse part, or how does that work?
no. So you have the guy Kirk Olson who owns it, right? It's a it, what I it's a and I hope people can sort this out, but there's a lot of ranches and stuff, especially nowadays, that people with that have been very successful in another area of life come in and they buy a big ranch, right? And a lot, not all of them, but a lot of those ranches, they don't necessarily have to pay for themselves because they're funded, you know? And that's great because it's a lot of those people with that money are actually putting these ranches back together and making them big again. Because a lot of these ranches used to be huge and then they sell off pieces of these ranches and they shrunk them down. Now a lot of those people are coming in and taking care of a lot of that and getting these ranches to where they're big again. So in a way that's wonderful. But what I like about this operation is it's a third generation operation that has grown into what it is. I mean, they farm almost 9,000 acres of corn. I mean, this place it's big, and they've done it. That family, the Olson family, uh, they've done it themselves with cattle,
Mm.
feeding cattle. They've grown this whole thing. There wasn't a lot of outside money. I'm sure they've had investments other places, but the gist of it is the cattle pay the bills, and they've been able to grow this that way. And so one thing I like about this operation is it is driven that way. I mean, we don't just we AI some mares to some nice horses like Blindsided or Would He Be Tough, and he's all for it, but we have to figure out how to do it to where it makes sense. Otherwise, they're not
Mm.
interested, you know. And and it's hard to make sense a lot of times when it comes to raising horses. At the end of the day, it really doesn't make sense. But luckily, we're able to sell enough horses. The market's been wonderful for as a seller, right? Maybe not for a buyer, but for a seller the last couple of years. And so it's really helped us to be able to kind of do some new things and some ideas to help build a name for their program slowly, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far as do I manage the 40 people? No, the Kirk Olson is my boss, and really, if he has an area in one of the feed yards that he needs help in an area, if something a pen of cattle's tipping over and we can't get it figured out, he usually calls me to go in and figure out what it is. The reason why. All of the outside ranch stuff, they own two other grass ranches, and he like I don't even know how much he went out and looked at cattle this summer. I mean, it's enough for 6,000 yearlings, or has been in the past. Some of it he sold to his son-in-law and his daughter, who are purebred bull people, by the way. They're in North Platte, like your dad is, Joe. And but anyway, so I just take care of all the flow of cattle coming onto those ranches, going out, and all the daily stuff. Help him manage that through the summer, right? And then the horse program, the employees that are at the horse program, I do the majority of helping those guys know what's coming and going, and kind of the management of that, if you will.
Sure.
But the employees are the owners are very hands on. So to say I oversee it all, no. I just try to be where Kirk, the owner, can't be, and that's what I try to do. Right. So if he's going north, I'm going south. That's what I try to do.
Gotcha.
Are they from a
Gotcha.
ranching background, the Olson family?
Am
No,
I?
the Olson
No, the
family.
Olson
Is
family.
that what?
Are they a family who's
Oh
done
yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
else and then came
Yep.
in and bought a ranch, or they're dyed in the wool?
No, third generation, and they put the whole place together with
Wow.
cattle. I mean, it's been 100% cattle that has helped them build into what they are
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, it sounds like the
That's awesome.
guys riding there. I mean, they're well mounted. That's that's nice to
Yeah,
get to ride those kind of horses every day and be learning on them. Man.
absolutely. Yep, yep, absolutely. It's a rare thing to see in a feedlot.
Yeah.
You really don't ever see it in a
Out of
feedlot.
those 40,
And so we take a lot of pride in it.
yeah. I'm sorry guys. I think I'm a little step behind on the glitch.
Yeah,
Um
you are. It's fine.
there we go. Out of those 40 employees, how many of them are signed on just as a riding position?
Probably, I don't know, just offhand, maybe 12 to 12 of them, give or take 12 to 15. It all depends on the season. people do come and go. So 12 to 15 are livestock full time, and then others are office crew, or he's got a big farm crew. He's got just the guys that drive the feed trucks and all that kind of thing.
You all put up any hay there?
Gotcha.
No, 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 no hay. It's all corn.
Hmm.
He buys all of his hay.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Um, so I was talking with Robbie about the Lazy U, and he mentioned how, at least in his eyes, he felt like you were kind of leading the charge for upping the quality of horses there at the Lazy U. And he was talking about how, I guess before you got there, it was more of a volume game, and
Mhm.
just turning out quantity over quality. Um, and like you said, it's often really hard to make the numbers on breeding horses work out. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about where, like, why you wanted to go in that direction and how you kind of made that sale, so to speak, to kind of get the Olsons on board?
So to clarify, Olsons have always wanted to have quality,
Hmm.
right? They've always wanted the quality. I mean, they feed fat cattle, right? And they understand the game of volume, right? That's why Walmart is the way it is. It's a game of volume. You follow me?
Yeah.
When the margins are so thin on things, you got to sell a lot of it. So that's and then horses collect. I mean, Andy, bless his heart, he loves horses. He's Kirk's dad. He'd be the second generation. He's really the man behind the horse program. He's kind of the boss of the horse program. I work through Kirk, his son, a lot, but Andy's really the guy. Andy's been in the business a long, long time, breeding horses for a long time, and so just to clarify that side, right? And then for as far as helping them with the quality versus the quantity side, I mean, they've bought in the last few years without my help, they've bought a handful of really nice stud horses. So the Olsons do have they understand they're getting or getting to understand, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, they're putting a lot of money into some really nice HF Mobster, one time Pepto, once in a blue moon, right? There's a horse out there called Don't Stop Believing. We have a full embryo brother to him. Actually, one of Robbie's customers just bought a horse I've been riding for a couple of years that's of those bloodlines, that they're going to show. So that would be a lot of the quality side of things. Really, all that the operation really needed um, is just someone to help them kind of not let the wheels come off too hard. You know what I mean? Because you can collect those horses, and it's like, now what do we do with them?
Sure.
So just me coming in and helping them organize their crew and kind of help us get on a little bit of a mission statement or a plan, as you will. Like, what type of horse, saying to the owners, what type of horse do you guys want to raise? And I'm telling you, the top two things on their list is color and breeding, right? I mean, it's paperwork, how they're bred, and color.
Yeah.
And those two things are important because they do sell. But they're not important to me. So the two things that have been really important to me are the mind and the confirmation. So we make a really good team that way. And they over the years, it took a lot of trust, right? Because you're not just going to let some guy in and just, you know, with that much investment, just come in and start, throwing horses out, So it took some time for me to develop their trust and sorting their yearlings every year into groups and talking with them of, this is my idea. And sometimes they'll come in and say, nope, we like that one, put him back. And you put him back, and but it's been a team effort. It really hasn't been anything just I've done. It's all about it's really not me. It's about the people that work there that execute it day after day after day, right? And so that's where I've put the majority of my time in, is in the team, not so much the horses themselves. And as far as how did I sell that on them, uh, it's hard, you guys. I don't know how it is for for where you guys are from, but it's really hard to find employees. And it's really hard to find employees that have experience, right? It's tough. It's just tough, especially in the agricultural world when it comes to those horses and cattle and everything that I understand. I mean, our herds of yearlings are 1,500 head. You don't just send four people out there that don't know what they're doing and get those yearlings to do what you need them to do, right? And so there's an experience that I brought that is hard to find. And actually, the guys that worked at the steerhead that were the horse program, my wife and I were buying yearlings from this program when they had a production sale. We were buying colts, and we did it 2 years in a row. In the second year, um, one of the employees was leaving, and he was just moving on with his life. Young guy, 20, low 20s, and he was just going on. And I said, and he said one of the reasons was is they're getting behind on horses, and they got 5 and 6 year olds that aren't started, and they kind of halfway scare him. And it's like, I don't know what to do with these things. I don't know how to handle them. And that was a little bit of what our conversation was. And I said, give this place one more year. Give it one more year. I'll donate. I live right here, in this town. I'll donate my time to you guys when I'm home, and I'll help you guys develop the ability to be able to get through these horses. Just give it a year, and if there's nothing to lose for any of us. And at the end, you could, still leave, um, and you'll leave with some knowledge, and just use this program a little bit to gain some knowledge. Well, within that year, I would be there, and the Olsons didn't really know me. They didn't know I had this conversation with their employees. I didn't ask permission. I didn't run it by anybody. And the Olsons have ever really seen me in a sale barn buying yearling cattle for myself, right? To start and load lots to put in the feed yard to sell and go through all that starting calves. And so I was at the arena one day helping their employees, and they kind of came in and said, "What are you doing here?" Most of the people in that town don't even know what I do for a living as far as travel and work horses.
Mm-hmm.
Kept that quite quiet, actually. And so they didn't realize that I had that ability with the horses. So I started just donate time, help the employees. Well, as time went on, I was starting to sell horses for them, but I was never on the payroll. I was not on their payroll for almost a year. It was a little over a year, actually. Olson's never paid me, but I started to show up more and more. And so then Kirk, the owner, would come to me and say, what can we give you for doing this? And so they just give me a filly of my choice, for a year or so. We kind of went through that. I just got to pick a horse that I wanted. And then as time went on, they needed employees. I saw the potential for the operation. They were having some issues in a feed yard with death loss. I had ideas on how to take care of that wasn't being executed at the time. Um, the management the operation got so big for Kirk, it was hard for him to get everywhere. And so I think part of it was with my experience, um, that he saw the value in me, and then we just started to create a relationship. And next thing you know, I work for Olson Farms.
Hmm.
That's kind of how it worked. It really wasn't anything where I went and interviewed for the job or anything. I kind of worked my way to have the job that I have. And in the position that I'm in, to my knowledge, they've never had anybody in the position I'm in. I've kind of helped make that position for myself.
That's awesome.
We call that Forrest Gumped.
Yeah.
That position into existence. Ricky, that's really cool.
Exactly.
Because you added value and you gave a lot before you expected to be given something. And I know especially our younger generation, people in their 20s and teens coming up now, and God knows what kids are going to be like. They want so much and they don't give anything. And I'm around Bill all the time, and in the medical business, he comes home sometimes and he goes, man, he'll even joke with me. He goes, man, I wish I could teach you how to be a surgeon. I'd love to work with you at the office more than some of these other guys, because they just take. And he goes, I've been working my ass off my whole life, and I've made my mistakes, but I've worked pretty damn hard, and I still don't even ask for anything. And these young guys, they're not even done their fellowship yet, and they want an even cut with me, and it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And you see that more and more, and you're saying, employees for sure. And what's crazy is when you do come across the occasional person who's really into this, especially specifically working in horsemanship on a ranch and trying to learn these things as they go along, then they're just about willing to work for free because they're
Yep.
so into it. But as far as people who just want to work an honest day's work for an honest day's wage, it's we've been having a hard time down here finding help, and we've been lucky
Yeah.
for the people we had. We had
Yeah.
Dylan Palm, you know him. He spent a whole year with us down here,
Yep.
and that boy, what a great guy!
Yep.
Just faithful. I loved working with him. Good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. I got to meet him up there in Northwest Washington, and I could really relate to Dylan. He's my kind of guy. Very, I don't know how else you say it, right? He's a very earthy kind of guy, and I recognize that. And when the clinic was over up there, he and I and Evan jumped in a pickup, and Dylan uh, took us out into those mountains up there in that Sultan country of Washington. And that's about as wild a country as I've ever really been in, and beautiful. And he spent a lot of time out there in those mountains, and so I could kind of relate to his style. Yeah, so he's a good guy. Yeah.
Yeah. D- Dylan's great. I really enjoyed getting to meet him while he was working down at Stony Creek.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so obviously, Ben painted the picture, but gosh, I imagine going from being a clinician and kind of being a one man show to having to hire people. Uh, did you have a pretty big learning curve for that? I think I would if I all of a sudden had to
So
start reading people all the time.
So I worked for McGinnis Meadows right out of high school. I was there almost 9 years,
Oh, okay.
right? And so, and then working for Shane up there, and then working with Randy Bach an awful lot. Shane runs a huge masonry company in Seattle, Washington, and he has a style that I learned a lot from as far as with people. And then Randy, um, he has such a nice nature to him, and kind of what he expects of people, and completely different guys, right? And learned a lot from each one of them. And then I left out of there in 2007 and went on the road on my own with my wife, and started doing clinics and stuff. And then that learning curve of how to get along with people has been really a tough one for me. I really struggle with that. And as far as people feeling good when when they're around me, and really struggle with that. And that's been a tough one for me. And then so going through that transition of being on the road, being self-employed, right? Riding around in that arena, trying to get people to understand that gap between that trouble they have with themselves and their horse, trying to be honest with the person and saying it's not your horse. And you kind of need to read some self-help books if you want to be able to get along with your horse, right? That's the gist of it. And then there's a side where, yeah, that horse is taking advantage of you, and these are some things you need to adjust to, or just figuring out some of that balance. And then through all of that combination of my life, and then yes, to answer your question, it's been a huge learning curve at Olson Farms. And through all of my experiences of life growing up, and how I grew up with the family I grew up with in Wyoming, ranching background, the whole thing, then going to McGinnis Meadows, learning that side of things, then going on the road, being self-employed, to where you have to get along with people or they don't show up and you can't make a living, right? Then rolling out of that, not out of that, because I'm not out of that. I still do that, but rolling from that a little bit into Olson Farms, and to where the clinics are one thing I've learned, because you're only around those people for 3 days, right? And even colt starting in a clinic scenario is not the same. You got 3 days and then you never see those colts again, right? The Olson Farms thing really changed things for me a lot in a way. And maybe it's my age too, and my mind has opened up a little more. But getting into that, because I get to have to work with those people, it's not just 3 days, then everybody goes home. You got to work with those people day after day after day. And one of the biggest things that I've learned for me being there and helping that crew is do not be a clinician. don't do it. Just because you see something that doesn't fit what your experience is does not mean you have the right to tell them. They are a crew member. They're not there in a clinic format to be told what to do all the time based on their horsemanship and stuff. They're there for a job, number one, right? Well, number one, a lot of the people I hire and what I tell them is, you guys, I know that you're not going to be here forever. I know it's probably going to be 2 to 3 years, 5 years max. But what I want to offer you is knowledge and wisdom so that when you guys leave here, you're a better, whatever it is in this area, you're better and you know more so that the next job you can go to, you can work your way up the ladder and know and have something to offer the next place you go. So when you come to work for me, you come to work for Olson's, my driver always is, what can I help you learn? It's not, my driver isn't what can you do for the operation today. My driver is, what can I help you learn? And in that process, what can I help you learn while you're doing your job and executing what we need you to execute for the operation? And so that's held some people. It's really hard to hold pen riders in a feed yard for very long. It, like a year is a big deal. As far as there, every once in a while, you'll get somebody stay for quite a while, one person or so. But to hold the crew that we've held for the years that I've been there, you don't really see that in a feed yard because I keep trying to help these guys and girls. The majority of them are female, actually. I try to help these guys and these girls continue to build their own self as a person, maturity, wisdom, all these things in life, and then really build their stockmanship, their horsemanship, and feel like I'm helping them add value to their life. And I constantly tell them, it's going to be really fun to see the day you actually are ready to leave. I constantly talk to those guys about that, constantly talking to them about the day they leave. And I think that also helps, right? They always know that that door's open. There's going to be no hard feelings when they leave. I've been around places where it's always been hard feelings when you left, right? Different places. And that I learned that. And always have that door open and almost trying to push them out the door. And they like shut the door and keep wanting to come back, you know? But we'll send them to clinics. I'll help them. But just whatever I need to do to be able to help them build themselves into being better. That's the driver. And so the hiring and then the firing, and never really fired anybody. I've hired a few. The majority of them have always worked out for a longer period of time. Some of them didn't last very long. That's just people, right? But then me learning how to present myself differently to them, to where they want to, they're not they're comfortable around me. They're comfortable talking to me when there's problems on the operation, right? And they can. I try to be really communicate with them to where they truly can feel like they can talk to me, and I won't get offended. I won't necessarily feel like I'm just protecting the operation. I always take the operation side. Um, that's kind of probably a long way going around it, but that's what I've gotten
Yeah.
from a lot of different things, you know.
Yeah. No, that was a terrific answer. Because that it's kind of like everybody, whatever the job is in front of you, you just have to draw from all your experience and
Yeah,
go from there. But
yeah.
yeah, that's Ben and I talk about that
But
quite a bit.
and one of the things I was wondering if Ben was alluding to a little bit too, as far as people wanting to take, and then the knowledge and the whole thing. I get a lot of young people that ask me, um, if I want, or people that are just getting going in the horse business, right, or want to be a cowboy or whatever it is. And I feel very fortunate to be able to grow up the way I grew up with the crowd that I grew up with that side of my family. Being introduced to Buck uh, in, I think it was like end of 1997, 98, right in there is when I saw him the first time at his place. I grew up in Ten Sleep, Wyoming, which is just on the west side of the mountains of where Buck's place is in Sheridan. And I was working on a ranch. I was 16, just turned 17. I was living on my own at that time, and I was working on a ranch starting some colts for him. And one of the hired guys that was there said, read this red book, the groundwork book, right? And uh, I'm going to go to this guy's clinic this weekend. You can come and watch. And to be really honest, when I opened up that red groundwork book, I saw this guy with this white flat brim hat. And I thought, well, that's a joke. Who the hell wears a hat like that? Right? That was my first impression.
Yeah.
And I read this stuff and I didn't take it too serious, you know? But when I went to Brannaman and watched him that first time, he was that I was really, it was a gift to be able to meet him at the time I met him. And you guys, I've spent a lot of time around that guy. I've traveled, I've gone to a lot of clinics, like a lot. I've traveled with him in his truck down the road. I've ridden with him at his home. I know him well. I've played a lot of golf with that guy, right? I was one of the drivers in getting him to play golf, and I'm so glad that he did. I've spent, he's dang sure a father figure in my life. There's no question, right? I've got a lot of father figures, and he's one of them that's way up there. There's no doubt about it. Anyways, going back, I watched him at his place. It was just right when the Horse Whisperer movie came out, and his indoor arena was brand new there in Sheridan. And it was when the gift I was saying is I got to see for a few years back in the Kip Fladlin days when he worked for him. I got to see Buck start all the colts that came to the clinics. The customer didn't ride their own horse like he does now. He rode them all. And I'll never forget, there was 7 head of colts at every clinic that he did. He had 7 head of colts, and he was riding every one of them. The majority of the time, he rode every one of them the first day, and that was such a new thing for me to see. And so he had this horse. It was a great big. To me, it was big. Bay 3-year-old that hurt a lot of people on a ranch just north in Shell, Wyoming. He brought this horse in. This horse came after him. He was afoot. The horse came after him in the round pen. At that time, he was riding a buckskin horse from the Krebs named Six. The horse's name was Six. He has Kip bringing his horse. He gets on horseback. And it was like 40 minutes he had the horse saddled and he was riding him around. And then through that, the horse was so bad to paw him that he had to bridle him from the fence. And then for the rest of the clinic, he used that colt to work all the other colts horseback. It was one of the neatest things I'd ever seen. And for him to walk through those horses the way he walked through them, I'd never seen anything like it. And I got to see it in real time. And it wasn't hearsay, right? It was real time, and I got to see it. So when I went home, it was right when internet and email first came out. So I was in school, and I sent Buck an email that said, "I'll work for you for free." So Ben, this goes back to what you were saying. I had nothing, you guys. I had like 2 pairs of pants, okay? And it's like, I'll work for you for free as long as you kind of house me and feed me. I want what you have. So Mary, Buck's wife, told Shane Jackson about me up there in Montana. And so Shane called me, and Shane hired me. And so that's where I got my start. That's where I cut my teeth, is up there. And then, so then my mindset was that, like, the way I grew up, it's like, I'm starting from ground zero here. So I went up there, had some experience, tried to work hard for Shane. But then another gift that I got was a man named Roland Moore. Are you guys familiar with him?
Never heard of him.
I'm not.
Yeah, he is a gift. He's a gift. So Roland is Buck's brother-in-law. So Buck's foster parents.
I think I have heard the name, but that's it.
Yep. So it's Buck's brother-in-law. So he was up there helping get that program of Shane's going, getting it off the ground, right? Getting the horses going, establishing a foundation in horses to get that whole program rolling. So I got to be on the ground floor of that operation getting started up there. And so I worked with Roland every day for quite a while, a couple different summers. And when I was first around Roland, one day we go to dinner at the lodge, and it was a few days of working with him, brand new, right? And he said, "Ricky, do you like working with me? I mean, is what I'm presenting to you, is it something that's helping? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Like he then at that time in my life, when I met Roland, I forgot about Buck Brannaman. Roland is who I wanted to be like. I mean, this guy is a hand. So on Buck's podcast with you, Buck talked about the Flying D and the Cowboys on the Flying D. Roland Moore was one of them.
Cool.
Yep, he was one of them. Roland says that the thing that ruined the cowboy are horse trailers and tailor-made cigarettes. That's what he said, has made the cowboy soft. So anyways, working for, he said to me, he said, you like working with me? And I said, absolutely. I want to learn what you have. I want to be like you. And he said, okay, good. I like working with you. He says, so here's the deal. If I help you, if we have a relationship and we move forward with this, he said, if I ask you to stick your head into a bucket of crabs, you ask me, where's the bucket? Right? So those old school guys, and that was easy for me because growing up the way I did with the family I grew up with, I wrestled all through middle school and high school, wrestled a lot, took it seriously, as serious as I could, right? And so I understood how to just be quiet, listen to the coach, and just do what they say. And don't say a word. Just do what they say. They know what's best. They have more experience. Just shut up and do it, right? So that's kind of where Roland was coming from with some of that. And then back to some of these younger kids, it is different. It is different now. And I can't explain why. And I don't know if they're softer or harder or any of that. I try not to get into too much of that because that's always just got me in trouble when I have too many opinions about something. So what I'm learning is the kind of men that I grew up with and what they asked of me was very old school and it was very hard. They were very hard. It's like in my family, if you didn't get in a fist fight with your dad or somebody in your family, your uncle, right, to figure out like you didn't ever get any respect. It was all about who could almost dominate who, right? And then it's almost like a pack of wolves. Whoever wins the fight is the top wolf, and then everybody listens to the top wolf, you know. And nowadays things are such, all the knowledge out there, you know, if you read the book The Power of Now, of being centered within yourself and being conscious, and that is the opposite of fighting your way to the top of something, right? And I think there's so much knowledge out there now, and then also the way this world's working, everybody wanting to get along, everybody trying to find that peace and that soft, right? That I think sometimes we're a little bit off center in that sometimes things are hard and sometimes you do have to work at things. And sometimes when you have the right coach, they're going to tell you what you really don't want to hear. And sometimes you got to pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, right? And get after it and take constructive criticism. And sometimes take criticism that was completely off the wall unfair and sort it out, right? Because that's how this world works. And young people come to me and they ask, if I get involved into this business, what would you tell me? How would you tell me to start? And it's a tough one because a lot of people will, you know, ride. One of the relationships I have with Robbie that he talks to me about is the experience I have of outside type cowboying stuff. It wasn't until 2007, you know, I was all my life in 2007. 2007 is really where I started to understand an arena. I didn't ride in an arena, you guys. It was all big country out. I'd have 8 horses in my string and we'd pull 30 miles a day, right? I've got a saddle that all the tooling is wore off of it from my legs. Like the leather's thinned down. It was outside and it was riding, you know. And so I have a different perspective on what horsemanship is too.
Yeah.
And what the horse means to me and what I kind of think they're for, right? And so these young people, they ask, and I said, knowing what I know today, you guys, and I'm not trying to sell a position on you, but knowing what I know today, if you can get into a feed yard situation for a couple years of your life at some point in your career, You will never, if you want to be around cattle and you want to understand cattle, the people that I work with, each yard has about 20,000 head in it. I don't know of very many people that look at more cattle on a daily basis than somebody that rides in a feed yard. So if you want to understand stockmanship and you want to understand what it's like to ride in mud and do a job and ride on slick ground and ice and do a job and uh, uh, do a lot of these different things, I recommend that you find yourself a feed yard just for a few years of your life. And then when you go to a ranch scenario, it's going to offer a completely different thing. Bigger pastures, right? A lot of times, when you work on a big ranch or something like that, I've heard Buck say it, and he's not wrong. Roland has said it too. You're kind of a glorified trail rider. You ride a long ways before you even run into the cattle. It's just more riding than anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all. And then the other piece of it too is what I tell these younger people, or try to help them with if they're truly asking my honest opinion, is you kind of you got to get to where you're not afraid to die. That's one of Robbie's terms. You got to get to where you're not afraid to die, because if you want to know what I know, you've got to be willing to really ride and get on things that and go into scenarios that I don't mean purposefully, right? You only get to do so much
Yeah.
groundwork, right? There's a point where when you're paid to do a job on a horse, ready or not, you've got to go do your job. And there's also a learning curve there in doing that job and using that horse. And he's not quite ready to rope on, but you're with the crew and you've got to do your job. And some of that in the horsemanship world is starting to go away. It's turning a little bit more from what I've seen too is, and this is what I'm trying to help people that are younger generation. I want them to find that place. That's what Ray Hunt had, right? That's what Brannaman has. That's what Martin Black has. That's what Joe Walter has. They have a lot of that outside real experience of what it takes to take a green horse and do something real with him. Going over a tarp so many times only gets you so far, right? And so I get in helping these people to develop themselves and to develop their career in the horse world. Really, it's just what do you want to do with it, right? What do you want to do with your career? What do you want to do with your in the world of horses for you? And I'm really fortunate in being able to grow up the way I did and then be introduced in the way I was introduced to be able to develop the understanding that is still always changing for me today, you know.
What sounds like growing up the way you did,
That's
like in this this fighting and not a great environment from what it sounds like. Did you just know as a kid, like this can't be the way that humans should interact? Like there's got to be a better way. Or was there a moment where you were enlightened and you thought, "Oh, this feels better."
Yeah, so my dad's a pretty bad alcoholic. When I was 25 years old, he ended up taking his own life. I was actually working up there at McGinnis when he'd finally had enough, right? And it was the only way out. It was the only way he could kind of rid himself of the things that haunted him, and that's what he chose to do to solve those problems. And before that, my my dad was a rough man. There's no question that he was a rough guy, and I loved my dad. He was a drinking, fighting, loving cowboy. I mean, he was one of the probably the toughest man I've ever met in my life. I've seen him in bar fights, right? I mean, been in fights with him. I mean, growing up, the things that he presented me to in the mountains, whether it was livestock, whether it was a sense of pride of being a cowboy, if you will, right? That pride that he had. Um, he we guided some hunters every year, and my dad started me in that area when I was pretty small. In sixth grade, I had my own trap line. And I'd run my own trap line in the wintertime, and I would skin animals and I'd sell the hides. Some people don't like that, right? And that's an area where I'll hold firm. I still do it to this day. I run a coyote line every winter, and it was one of my favorite things to do. And I've got my boy, he's 8. When I left the house here just a couple days ago, he had his Cricket 22 with him. He had his backpack with matches and I don't know what. He had a piece of plastic pipe. Don't know what he's going to do with it, but he felt that he needed it. He's got a big old Bowie knife on his leg. And my kid will take off for hours out in the hills by himself as an 8-year-old. And he's starting to venture further and further and further out all the time. My dad wasn't as graceful as I'm trying to be with my boy to help him develop the confidence. My dad, when I was 13 years old, I still have the gun. It was built in 1908. It's an old original 30 WCF 3030 Winchester, and the old nickel steel barrel and all that. And when we guide these hunters, my dad had dropped me off on the top of the canyon opening, and he'd have me roll down through the bottom of the canyon. And if an elk would roll out, he'd have the people that are from Minnesota, not used to that, on the rim of these big old rock canyons there outside of Ten Sleep, on the rims glassing. And if elk rolled out, they could reach across those canyons and they could shoot themselves a bull. I was kind of the bird dog. And my dad told me, 13 years old, he'd say, if you see a bull big enough, you shoot him. You don't wait for him to go out. You shoot him. And that's hard to do, you guys, because that country's big. And I remember times where he'd drop me off and send me through some of those places. And I would get down there by myself, 13, 14 years old, right in there. And I would cry. I was so scared and by myself. But my dad, he had me chewing Copenhagen, started me right around when I was 10, 11 years old. We would be working, doing a fence job or whatever it was, and the crew would be there, and I'd start about that age drinking beer with them. The crew would be like, Rick, what are you, my dad's name is Rick, what are you doing? The kid's like 12, you know? And my dad would say, he's old enough to work like a man, he's old enough to drink like a man. And that's how my dad was. And so he demanded a lot of me as a little kid. So going down through that country by myself in those mountains really scared me in a lot of ways. But he gave me a lot of support. And the support was, if you get lost, you always follow water downhill and you always run into another ranch. If you get hurt, you have these, I always carried matches. You have these matches on you. If you get hurt, you just start a forest fire. I'll find you. That was his support. Right? And then roll down through them. There's many times in those canyons I'd kill an elk or a deer. And what was really hard, the thing that a lot of people that I look back on is it'd be miles back in there and I'd meet him at the bottom of the canyon. He'd pick me up. And if I shot something back in there, at that age, I had to remember how to get him back in there to show him where it was to get it packed out. And that was probably the most stressful part looking back of the whole thing is once I killed something, remembering how to get him back to it, to have that memory and that whole thing at that age. And so the growing up then it was hard, but I loved my dad because my dad, he never treated me like a kid. My dad always pushed on me as if I was better than I was. He always pushed on me. Was he hard on me? Did he kind of mess with my head a little bit? Was he abusive? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I'm very glad I had the father that I had because it helped me create a grit inside of my guts that I don't know if you could get in very many places today.
Yeah, in an interview that I had heard with you, you said you were thankful for the kind of life you had grown up in, the turmoil and kind of maybe the anger or just any of the facets of that. And now I could understand that. And probably not anybody could just take that kind of an upbringing. But in a way, that's not a childhood in a sense most people would be lucky to have. And if you had the character, it would build you into
Yeah.
quite the man. And obviously it's something you've really learned from.
Well, yeah, and you asked that question. I kind of get lost
Yeah,
sometimes
no
when you
problem.
ask questions, and I apologize.
You're
But
a clinician
you
and
asked
stuff,
that question. What? That's funny, right there. That's really funny, and kind of true. But uh, you asked that question of when did it hit you, right? When it really hit me was my parents got a divorce when I was about 15 or 16, right in there. And my mom is Warland, Wyoming. And I knew it was going to be difficult for my mom. She would have done it, right? But being the way I am, I knew it was going to be difficult for her to be able to feed both me and my sister. And so I just told my mom, I said, I'm just going to live with dad. I just kind of want to make it easier and I'm just going to live with dad. And she was very hesitant. It was very hard on her that I made that decision. And I don't sometimes don't talk about my mom enough and I need to. I am a person that you don't really Brannaman figured this out with me early, and he saw this in me, and he protected me in so many areas. Looking back, that I appreciate in him so much. I don't do good when somebody tells me what to do, and I'm working on that, right? And my mom saw that early on, and so she really left me alone. And in some ways, maybe that's bad, but she really left me alone, and she just let me do a lot of dangerous things and just kind of be. And I really appreciate her for that, knowing what I know about myself today, and then looking at my older son now, my 8-year old. You got to leave him alone. You can't micromanage him, or you'll create resentment in him. It's really an interesting. It's our curse,
Hmm.
actually. And so when I went to live with my dad, we lived on ranches and stuff, and my dad could never really hold a job for very long. And I finally came home from school one day, and from tent sleep, and he had the pickup packed up, and I said, "What's going on?" He says, "Well, I'm done with this place," and it was always somebody else's fault. Very, very alcoholic mindset, and he said, "I'm done with this place and leaving." And I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to such and such, and I don't really know what you're going to do. You might have to find somebody to live with." And that moment, I was trying to work with my dad. I was trying to live with my dad. I knew that he was trouble. I was starting to see it. I was getting old enough to start to see the trouble and really kind of embrace it and start to develop my own opinions on it. And when he said that, I didn't consciously think it, but I knew I was done. Then I really started to resent my father. And that took me to a whole other place. So luckily, a family friend of my dad's went to high school with. He was actually the government trapper there in Wyoming. Loved it. Got to go with him in so many different ways, learning more about that and the whole thing. But he let me live in this little tiny 1970s camper in the alley, right behind the Bighorn Bar there in Tensley. And so my junior, senior year of high school, that's where I lived, is in that camper. And I put myself through my junior and senior year of high school. And so to answer, and then when I was in that camper is when I met Buck Brannaman, right? I was on my own, and that's when I met Buck. And then Buck in his clinics at that time, um, everybody evolves and changes, but he was a different man at that time than what he is today, and you should be, right? You're growing and being different. But the way he talked about his father and his upbringing and the whole thing, that is the number one thing that attracted me to Buck Brannaman because of the position that I was living in at that time. And I was actually going to be going to Eden Prairie, Minnesota to be a pipeline welder.
Hmm.
Loved it.
Hmm.
I was on we call it as a joke, but I was on a welding team for the school of Warland, and I was on the varsity team, right? We go to big competitions around Wyoming and weld. And so that's what I was going to go do. But I knew ranches. But when I saw Buck, I didn't necessarily say that I wanted to do clinics. I just knew that I wanted to be like Buck
Hmm.
Brannaman because of how at that time in my life, it really fit, right? To me, there's the mentor right there. My dad took me so far. There's a book I read that Joel Connor told me about that you guys know, and the book is "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." Really interesting book. And so, what got me here at that time, I knew wasn't going to get me any further, right, in life if I lived like my father. Met Buck Brannaman, that gave me an idea, right, for me. And so, I still do, chase Buck Brannaman, right? And so, Ben, that's to answer your question. That is how that worked out for me.
Huh.
Hmm.
Hell of a story.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, that's kind of a good tie-in, and obviously you've read several interesting books, and I can tell just by how you talk, you're um you think pretty deeply about this stuff and what I guess areas for you to improve, right?
Yeah.
You're one of
Yeah.
those people who works on themselves quite a bit and is kind of introspective that way. Um, I saw a really cool thing you posted. I started following you on Instagram a couple weeks ago, um, and you posted a really cool um, post that was talking about the two lumberjacks in the woods chopping wood together.
Hmm.
And I had never
Hmm.
heard that story. And
Yeah.
just so everyone listening's up to speed, and Ricky, correct me or elaborate if I'm leaving anything out, but basically there's two lumberjacks that work all day side by side, and they chop wood all day at the same rate. Or they work the same amount of time rather. Um, and one of the lumberjacks, he disappears for an hour in the middle of the day and then comes back. So you know, he's working one less hour a day every day. But somehow he always ends up chopping more wood. And so the lumberjack who chops less wood asked him, well, what's the deal? I'm always uh, here more than you, even because you disappear in the middle of the day. What are you doing? And why are you chopping more wood than me? And the guy says, oh, I go home and sharpen my axe. Um,
Yeah.
and for whatever reason, it's pretty easy to get almost mindless on social media. Um, but for whatever reason, that really stuck with me, like that story. Um,
Yeah.
and so I guess a two-part question for you, and, and it seems like you've always kind of been this way, but when was there a time in your life when you're like, I really need to start working on me? Like, did you have that kind of conscious moment? And two, today, like what are some things you do to sharpen your axe, so to speak?
Okay. So the first thing that I have to tell everybody on here is I don't I have a Facebook account. My wife does all of that and she doesn't even ask me. So I saw that probably at the same time you saw it, right? But what I love about my wife is she knows me sometimes better than I know myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so she posted that. And sometimes she posts some of those things. And to be honest, sometimes I see some of them. Uh, that one, and then there was another one of me saddling a horse, and that song of, oh, I can't remember, but it's the best that I got.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you saw that one, but it's on there. And some of those kind of bring a tear to my eye, not because they're on social media, but to be honest, because my wife knows me and she knows she's trying to help me, right? And she knows the emotional work that I try to put in. Um, and a lot, she's behind the scenes, but she's not. The people that do know her, my wife is a very, very powerful female, and she kind of needs to be able to get along with me. But she, she's got a lot of really good. She's just wonderful, and so that would be the only thing I'd correct on that is that wasn't me, that was her, right? But she understands me to where she knows that's something that I would, that would be fitting. And it's not just me, it's her too, because she is the same way as the lumberjacks, right? And she works as hard on herself as I do on myself. That's a really big one for us, is to constantly try to figure out our emotions and use them at the right time and how much, and really, uh, really manage those emotions. And so I remember I'm like a little kid, Joe. So I always remember the last thing you said, not the first thing. The first thing. When did I real? Was I always that way? I think my answer to that is, as far as working on myself, is yes. Um, I'm not a philosopher by any means. I read some philosophy, right? I enjoy reading philosophy. I think the person in my life that probably opened that door for me in thinking that way is another man that is really high on my list of father figures is Randy Bach up there in Montana. He has a way of thinking. He has a way of going through stuff and an understanding that really got me thinking. I think I had that soul inside of myself, anyways. I don't have to work at it very hard to think that way, but I think he's the one that helped me crack that spot open inside of me to start, searching for that kind of stuff. You know, as far as what do I do to sharpen my axe, there's so many areas that I need to. One, I don't know how much you guys have heard of me, but they say you can't take an old head and put it on new shoulders. One of the things that uh, you got to let the past go, right? But what some of the clinics that I did in the past, I did not present myself very well to the customers, to the people that were there that believed in me. I did not come across to them. Didn't lie to them, and I wasn't necessarily wrong in what I was asking them to accomplish with their horse. But my presentation, I had a friend just the other day. It was Joel, and he said, and I was already onto this, but I mean, this is something that he said to me that hearing it from him really meant a lot, and it was not an insult to me. And he said, "Ricky, you're successful." He said, "But you could have been way more successful, but your delivery sucks." And he's not wrong, right? And I take the horsemanship so seriously, Joe and Ben. And if I was helping you guys, I'd make sure I found out what you weren't doing well. And by God, in 3 days, we were going to get it better. And some people, it really fit them. And I have a lot of lifelong friends that it fit them. And uh, they understood me. They understood where I was coming from, and they didn't take offense to it. But to be honest, more people were offended by it. And knowing what I know today, uh, in that knowing what I know today, I wished I would have presented myself differently. And so I'm working really hard in that area. So to back up to, what do you do, Ricky, to sharpen your axe? Well, number one, the most important part, well, like I talked about my wife, right? She dang sure helps me with that a lot. And she appreciate her honesty, and she's tough enough to be able to tell me the way it is, Um, the other thing, I don't know how you guys view horses or how you take them. Horses have been such a big part of my life, and I don't even ride now as much as I used to. I don't. I ride a fraction of what I used to, and I'm going to get back to rolling more, but it's just the position I'm in at this point in my life. I ride, but not as much. This is one thing I know that it's a fact. Horses help me get started of learning how to open up my heart and my soul, to turn loose and not feel like I needed to protect myself all the time and be tougher than everyone else around me. And that's how you win. Because the way horses work, because people suck, man, they suck. Because my dad would ask me to be a certain way, or there's other people I can think of in my life. You need to be this way and you need to change it. And so then you do, and they don't ever recognize it or adjust to it, right? And so then you feel like you've been done wrong or you're offended. And so you get to a point in life where people are like, well, you need to be this way or you need to be that way. And you get to a point you may be done wrong so many different times that you start to just be like, I'm going to do it the way I'm going to do it. And that's it. And then that can be very closed minded. That can be it can just paralyze your growth inside. And so horses have been a gift for me because of a lot of Brannaman's philosophy and help at that time of my life of, the horse is never wrong, right? A lot of it came from Ray Hunt. For him, the horse is never wrong. All these different sayings that I know you guys have probably read and heard 1,000 times. But in my words, what I found for myself is that I've realized is if I real quick story. I was riding with Brandon, and I was proficient at the horsemanship, or thought I am, right, at the time. I could get some things done. I was riding with Brandon. I was riding this great big brown horse that looked like he was put together by a committee. Everything was difficult for him, and I was kind of pushing him through stuff. Man, this horse's mouth was busy, really, really busy. And I've ridden him a couple years, and I couldn't get this horse's mouth quiet. If you guys have been to the clinics, somebody asked that question, and the answer is if you get to his feet, it'll get his mind right, and his mouth will get quiet. And I could get this horse to do a lot of neat stuff and do a job and everything else. And I went to Brannaman in the middle of the arena when this microphone was off, and I said, I don't know, I'm lost, man. And I rarely ask him a question. He rarely has really ever said much to me. I just go and listen and try to copy. So this was rare for me to go and ask a question. So I said, this horse, I really struggle with this buck. His mouth is so active, and I'm what I've heard you say before is the answer is get to his feet, and his mouth will get quiet. And I feel like I'm getting to his feet. I feel like I can do what I need to do. Do you have anything else for me that might help crack this open in me? And he said, Ricky, you're correct. You can get to that horse's feet. He respects your hands and your legs, but that horse does not respect you emotionally, right? And there's a couple times in my life with Brandon where he said something to me where I saw stars, like I was going to pass out. And I'm not kidding about that. And this was one of them. It really, really hit home with me. And I got to thinking about that. I was off for, it felt like inside, I was off for a couple days because that one really drove something home. And I started to realize that it was a lot of, not that people didn't respect me, the people I knew, it's just emotionally they couldn't turn loose to me because of the way I was. And so that was several years ago. And that was the start of me really getting to think about a lot of the emotional stuff. So then with the horses, I've learned then, so I started to chase that. And it was a short amount of time where that horse's mouth started to get quieter because of the internal stuff I was chasing. And even before that, I realized, looking back, there were areas that if I can't get through to this horse in this place, I'm taking on the responsibility that it's my problem, not the horse's. I need to change to fit him. And every single time I change something within, sometimes it take a long time, change something in me, the horse always reciprocated every single time. And I got to trusting that. And if they didn't change, I knew I had to keep searching. And then when they would change, I then started, when I would change, then people around me, in a way, I started to notice people were viewing me differently because I changed to fit the horse. The horse let me know. Then I started to really trust that change in myself and the change I got in the horse. And then I started to see it with the people. So horses even meant even more to me because I could stay with it. When I changed, they were so honest about what they gave back, the feedback, that I could trust it and I could believe in it. They weren't going to let me down, right? There was no motive. There was no angle behind it like people can have, right? To ask you to change. And that's probably the most important thing in my life right there that hit me. And I'm constantly trying to chase it still to this day is that place. That's a huge driver for me. And just in livestock in general, the big one's horses. And then another piece of what I work at, and I'm not real consistent with it. I'll get on kicks. I don't know about you guys, but I try to read a lot. And I do not like listening to books. There's something about, for me personally, I know a lot of people do, and they get a lot out of them. I've tried listening to them, and I like picking up a hard, or I buy hard covers too. I don't like soft. I don't know why. When I read those books, and I like the physical touch of the book. I like turning the pages, and I like creating the feel of the book and adding that having that voice come out in my own head of what I think that sounds like. When I listen to a book, there's a voice there. You follow
Yeah.
me? And sometimes I've been like, this voice doesn't fit this book for me. So when I read one, I seem to get more out of it, and I like the physical touch of the book. I read it, and another part is it forces me. I can't drive down the road and read a book. I can't clean a stall and read a book. Not that I do that very much. I can't build a fence and read a book. I can't do something else and read a book. I have to sit down and consciously turn loose to the book to get what that book has to offer.
Yeah.
And so for me, that means a lot. And then another piece that is a really, really important thing for me is I spend a lot of time by myself. I spend a lot of time by myself in the hills, and without that would be a big one for me, that I could kind of get a little bit lost if I don't take that. And it's not like, you guys, I don't go out in the hills and lay a rug down and get cross-legged, and hold your hands. I go out and I do something.
Yeah.
And that's what I love, the track line. I love it because it brings a feel. I love hunting. I get to shoot a nice deer every year. There's just something about that, that is really centering for me, to answer your question.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I recently found the ease of listening to books, and that it's handy. But I did find, and Joe and I talked
Yeah.
about this recently, that you'll listen to podcasts or books while you're driving around or doing things, and then you realize you're not even listening. It's just noise in your head. You're not getting anything out of it. And I'm still working through the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because I know we talked about that on episode number 1, and I'm not even done yet. But when I do read, I read out loud to myself even, and and then it takes me forever, and I'll even go back over the same chapter again.
Yeah.
But I'm learning to find
have
that
you
again. As a kid, I spent some time, never really like super alone, but maybe more alone in my head some. And so I found a lot of comfort from reading Louis L'Amour and William T. Johnstone. I liked his Western paperbacks. Few authors like that, and I'd get really into it. And I'd hear like Sam Elliott telling me a story, kind of thing. And then I kind of got away from that over the last couple of years. So, especially with the podcast, I find that helps.
technology's too easy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's making everybody soft.
Yeah, you don't exercise your brain enough. I think there's a point where, like, maybe if you listen to a podcast and then you go do like a book report on it, like, there you go. Now you're going uphill. But when you're just working and you're thinking about all the things you got to do today and how much you don't like so-and-so being a nag, and your mind's already just mental mush, and then you've got this guy droning over top of all that, and you're like thinking about when you can go get a glass of water and take a break for a minute. Like, everything about you is just being entertained, and you're like the dog that they've got hooked to the sled, and you're like number 8, and you're letting everybody pull you. You're like, well, I'm going with everybody, but I'm gonna do a little less if I can, instead of instead of saving that for later. When you got time to think about it.
And talking about the technology, Ben, I think it was Alicia Landman that you had on here. And I think highly of Alicia. I really enjoy her. And maybe it was Alicia, I can't remember, but you guys asked maybe a question of like, do you think technology helps the horsemanship? I can't remember what the question was, right? Maybe you guys can.
Oh man, you're really putting us on the spot, Ricky.
No, I kind of know.
You don't even remember.
I feel like it was.
Yeah, you guys
I think we talked about whether or not.
Yeah,
having like your AirPods in or something and being able to listen to stuff.
Yeah, we talked with Alicia about having our AirPods in, because Ben and I talk about that quite a bit.
Yeah, and probably the ease of looking things up, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the ease of looking things up. That's where I was headed with that, and even the earpod stuff. So For me, my dad wouldn't even let me listen to the radio in a vehicle going down the road.
Hmm.
And the reason was is he didn't want you to get distracted. He wanted you to pay attention to what was important. And all of our vehicles were pieces of shit. So he wanted you to listen to the vehicle to see if something was going wrong. Like, farming was the same way, a little bit of hay and stuff that we put up. He'd say, you pay attention, you constantly listen to this equipment. That way you can catch something before it gets wrecked too bad.
Yeah.
Right. And uh, I I have my truck. The radio doesn't even work in it. I drove 13 hours down here to Robbie's yesterday and never listened to the radio. I think I only talked to a couple people on the phone, things that I needed to do. Other than that, it was driving and thinking, lots and lots, just pondering and thinking and sorting through stuff, right? And I do that a lot. And with the technology side is really good because there's so much information out there. Um, and Joe, you're saying it makes people soft. I think sometimes it's a question, right? Is it making us like in the horse world? I wonder if sometimes that much technology, that much information makes us indecisive. We can't make a decision, right? If something's not working, we just Google it and we go over here to something else and we just keep doing things until we think it's working. And there's some truth to that, right? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and not having, right, whatever that whole thing is. But I know that when I got, if young people were listening to this, a little piece of advice that I would give is that when you find something you really, really like, and for me, it still to this day, but especially when I was younger, right? When I was really every day, Brannaman was on my mind all day long, every single day, right? Now it's different. I have a wife and kids and everything else. But Brannaman, man, that I always thought about it every day. And I've seen him do things with horses and it worked. And I would go try to do things with horses and it didn't work. And I didn't go try to look for another answer to get it to work. I stayed with what was being taught to me until I got it to work. I kept adjusting and figuring myself out in my approach,
Yeah.
right? Until it worked for me. And then it worked consistently on all different types of horses. Then I knew I had it. Then I knew it was a part of me,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think technology is great, but I think it can get us in our way because um, I think it takes us off task sometimes because we're looking for another answer. It's too easy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got two thoughts on what you just said, Ricky. One, with all the information, um, I'm a pretty firm believer, and I saw this a lot, um, kind of in my before I started riding for the public first full time. I worked in software, and so I was around a lot of people who pretty much like lived with their earbuds in and stuff like that. Um, and I'm a pretty strong believer that we as human beings are not designed to just have that kind of sensory information input all the time, like you were just talking about in your truck.
It's
Um,
it's an addiction.
yeah,
It's an
well,
addiction.
but also it doesn't really like your brain needs time to digest that stuff. You can't really just learn by having someone constantly talk at you all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I listen to audiobooks, but if I've got a long drive, like I'm driving down to Georgia or something, I'll listen for like 10, 15 minutes to an audiobook and then I'll pause it and I'll
Yeah.
just think about it
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
kind of let that digest. And I think that's a big thing that a lot of people miss because I've been a person my whole life who I can read and I'm not a very fast reader, but if I read something, I'm pretty well will remember it for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people with all, like you said, all the information we have, um, they just don't take time to digest the information.
Yeah.
Um, And then
Yep.
kind of tied to that, what you were saying with the horsemanship, um, people, because there's so many different paths, and we're Ben and I are both guys in our 20s, but I think it's fair to say there's a lot of people in their 20s who just don't have a lot of constitution, in that I'm not going to stick with this if it is not working
Yeah.
immediately. Um,
Yep.
which part of that is kind of human nature, like you said, like, well, you gotta understand and adapt, and all that stuff is really good to know. But that is something that I see in people in like lots of different pursuits, and they just don't have the constitution to kind of see something through.
Yep.
So yeah, that I really like what you said there, because there it seems like one of the things is there's always less and less people that are willing to trust the process.
Yeah. Or their coach.
Yeah.
That's a big one. It's athletes understand it, right? But a
Hmm.
lot of times the average person, I got to be careful saying that because that's not necessarily true. But I'm very thankful that when I got into this in the beginning, this can be crippling, you guys, and but it's also helpful. Um, to dedicate myself in a way. I don't want to be weird about this, but dedicate myself to Buck Brannaman, right? And I'm so thankful that I did and that I picked him uh, because the guy's good at what he does, right? And, but as I've gotten older, I still view him high, but I don't know what it is. I've spent some time with Joe Walter. I've gotten some things from him. I chased the performance world a very, very little bit, right? Um, and I'm getting around some other guys, especially like in that performance world, where it's been very eye opening for me. Interesting stuff. And it's no joke. I mean, these the guys that I'm trying to hang around, right? I've been through a lot of different guys. There's only a few that fit me. It's no joke, man. They're really getting some things done that I haven't seen out of their horses, that I've never personally seen the process, and then what they get as a result. It's absolutely made me a better horseman. But to go back, I'm very thankful of Brannaman because I believe without the understanding that I've gotten from Buck and what he has taught me in he is my foundation through and through. When I went over to this performance world, I catch on to things pretty fast because of the understanding he gave me of horses, right? And so one of those one of the pieces in this whole thing too that I've learned, if I can help you guys, right, if with any ideas, is find somebody that helps you get that foundation. And then once you have that foundation and you're very secure within your foundation, I think it's really important that you also notice there's other horsemen out there, right? It's really, really important. And it's it's like if I ask you guys, uh, does anybody know everything? And the answer is no. There's billions of people on this planet. There's a lot of people that have a lot of information, and and then going back, and so my point is of sticking with the process. So finding somebody that you really, really trust to help you get your foundation, listen to that coach, stick with that process, right? Learn however you need to learn, stay with it and trust that process and don't give up on it. And I know for me, I've stayed with Brannaman's process and it's really helped me a lot, right? To be able to now do what I do today. That's one of the reasons I'm halfway successful is because of him.
Y-
And I stayed firm and stuck with that process.
Yeah, and you hear him say that all the time, even in the clinics, that if you're wearing
Yeah.
spandex or a cowboy hat or whatever, that that you can apply that kind of horsemanship. It wouldn't matter what you're doing. And then that way too, I think
Yeah.
we talked about this with Robbie. If you get into something that was totally outside of the wheelhouse you started in, then you'll have a basis in that foundation you talked about. So you won't cheat the horse. You'll do right by him.
Yeah.
And you might see something and go, yeah, I don't want to do it like that. But I have this thing in my toolbox
Yep.
that I've learned. And so I know how to get around that. Or if you got into playing polo, or Joe and I actually here in November, we're going to go play some polo cross. Joe's been doing it a little bit. I've, I'm going to suck. But, that same thing, you show up and who knows what they're doing, but you're going to play the game with them, but you're still riding your horse with the foundation that you're learning and all the tools that you know.
Yeah.
So when you have a problem, you're not just going to go ask them what they
Absolutely.
do. You go back to your own playbook. Or
Yep.
you might ask them what they do and then you
Yeah.
go, "Huh, that fits right in with what I've learned." Or, that's a good idea, but I would change this little thing cuz maybe that doesn't make sense to a horse. So, yeah, that makes perfect sense what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And another piece for me too is I analyze it. There's no question that I analyze things. But just Joe, I think there's something that you said that bringing it up again. It's like trusting the process,
Mhm.
right? And I mean, I have this saying: "You are who you hang out with." That's a fact, right? You just are who you hang out with. That's how it is, right? And Brannaman's never led me astray, right? With what he knows and his understanding of things, he's never led me astray. I've always been able to accomplish things with horses the way he has helped me learn how to understand them and how to go about it. Guy's never led me astray. And he gets so much credit for me, that mental side of the horse and understanding the timing of the feet in the field. I ride with guys where I've asked them, okay, but his feet are doing this and that and the timing, and they're like, we don't care. We don't care. And it's okay. What's crazy is they're like, we don't care. We put this horse into a place and we keep a little pressure on him, and when he feels smooth, we release. That's pretty much all we're doing anyways. So what I'm saying is it's not all that far off. There's some people that don't care, and they flat don't care. And those people, I don't want to be around it, right? But there's guys that just don't overanalyze things, and they got such a great feel for a horse and what they're looking for that they don't analyze it, but I'm telling you, they can
Yeah.
do it. There's also something to that, you guys. There's something to just turning loose and just allowing the horse to find something, and you not having, in a way, any idea of what foot is doing what. Just feel what's right and just leave him alone when he does what's right. There's another, that's almost like you got to turn loose that much more in yourself to trust that process and not manage the steps. You follow me? Yeah. And in that process, I've never been bucked off more in the last 3 years than I have my whole life, to be honest. I haven't, because I'm really trying to turn my horses loose even more. I'll really allow things to be more their frame of mind, more their idea, to where I don't come in and manage as much and put a foot here, put a foot there, just kind of. And man, I've really got my ass handed to me several times, and I'm getting it under control now, finding the balance between the two. When to let them go, when to leave them alone, when to come in and help support them. And in working this cattle deal and in what I'm chasing, the horse has got to do the job, you guys.
Mhm.
You're just a passenger, right? And so giving that horse that confidence where he doesn't need to ask a question to you to do his job. There's another place there, right? That's helped me so much, just more turning loose to my horse and just letting him be. And they're easier to catch for me now. Right? They do. They get even a lot more gentle when you leave that much more up to them. It's really kind of fascinating. It's
Hmm.
neat stuff.
Yeah, the thing I've found, or I guess the way that it's helpful for me to look at it, especially when you're riding for the public and you have all these people trying to do all these different things with their horses and stuff. And I'm
Yep.
probably preaching to the choir, you being a clinician and dealing with all the different people you deal with. Um, I I tell people it's like learning music in that you've got to learn all the rules such that you can then learn how to break all the rules, right? So anyone, before ZZ Top became ZZ Top, they still had to learn how to play their scales correctly on the guitar, and they had to
Sure.
understand how all that relates to everything. And
Yep.
then from there, you can do, you can become, one of the most beautiful conductors in the world, or you can, you know, go play heavy metal or do but it all goes back to the same stuff. And if you don't
Yeah.
have, kind of what you referred to, that foundation, you can,
Yeah.
like we said, you can dress it up several different ways. But the people who are good at what they do, they at least have some level of understanding of that foundation. And
Yep.
that's what I have found helpful to explain to people is, kind of like music. You got to learn all the rules, and then you know how to break the rules, because obviously no two situations are the same. Trying to get a
Yeah.
horse to do this, or
Yep.
even just horse to horse. There's some
Yep.
things you got to
Yep.
do a bunch with one horse, and then you go to the next one and you're like, well, if I ever did that, I'd get my ass kicked. So I'm not going to do that with him.
Yeah. Yeah. For
Um,
sure. For sure.
so that's kind of how I look at it. And yeah, it kind of seems like you have a similar perspective.
I appreciate you putting it like that because it just that really makes a lot of sense. That's a neat way of saying it. Yeah, thank you for that. Can I use that?
Yeah, man.
But I don't know how to play music, so I can't
Hey,
back
I
it up.
I'm not musically inclined at all. I like,
Okay, very good.
yeah, yeah, but I've
So then my question, how do you know?
well, because at
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
no, no,
I'm
no,
kidding.
it's funny. So I, as a kid, I like was trying to learn. Like I was trying to play
Gotcha.
guitar and stuff, and I got to where I could like play a little bit, but they're like, well, if you really want to do well, you got to, learn your scales, and you really have to like understand how this all relates.
Gotcha.
And I was
Gotcha.
like, I don't want to do that. And then I never got good at
Gotcha.
music. So I know
Gotcha.
firsthand that if you don't take the
Yeah.
time to lay your
Yep.
foundation down, you won't go anywhere, because I didn't go anywhere.
Yep. Yep. You have to lay your foundation down. You got to learn how to save money, right? You really don't just save money. You got to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
It's foundation is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing. In anything you want to do, whether, I mean, it's the same thing in sports too. You look at um good basketball players at a really, really high level, they all have their
Yep.
unique style and little things that they do
Absolutely.
that make them
Yep.
who they are. But everything they're doing goes back to the fundamentals and footwork and
Yeah.
positioning. And all those
Yep.
guys have such a high level of understanding of how all that works. And then because they have that high level of understanding, they can put their individual flair on it, or, play a different type of game depending on who they are
Yeah.
as an athlete.
Yep.
So
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's good stuff. I like watching the people that are good at what they do.
same here.
For sure. For sure.
Cool. Well, Ben, you want to wrap this up with a Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, yeah, because we're kind of getting towards we're getting towards the supposed back end of the podcast. We found that when we shut off the deal, we're done, then that's the best conversation. So we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, if you listen to any of our podcasts, we hit people with a Mount Rushmore of something that is interesting. We were thinking with you, you're a funny guy. Seem like you're kind of sharp that way. So how about a Mount Rushmore of comedy movies? Your your 4 best comedy movies that really just hit the funny bone, in your own way.
Dang, I really appreciate you saying I'm a funny guy because I don't get that very
Well, you're
often.
maybe
I had
not
somebody
everybody
come
would
up to
get
me
it.
the other day and they said, "Man, you're." Yeah, good point. Yeah, maybe it's this stuff. Somebody came up to me not too long ago and they said, "You're really approachable," and I thought, Thank you so much for that, because that's the first time in my life I've ever heard that. It's really good.
Well, I mean, when we turned this on, that was the first time we've ever met. You were very approachable, and all that stuff we're going to cut out at the beginning of the podcast that you guys didn't hear. Ricky's hilarious. This guy's on
Yeah,
top of it.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, if you like that kind of humor.
Again, yeah, if you get it, or you like it,
Yeah. Again.
Yep,
you
Yeah.
don't shut it off.
yep, yeah. Um, I think for myself, as far as like, I don't know, I like TV shows like The Blacklist.
Okay.
That's not a comedy,
Mm-mm.
My
Not even a
favorite
little.
movie. No, my favorite movie is August Rush.
I don't think I've seen
You
that.
guys watch that movie?
I've never heard of that movie.
Little kid gets separated from his parents, and music brings them back together.
August Rush. I'm
August
gonna write that
Rush.
down.
Yeah, really good movie. Another movie. I can't believe I can't think of the name of it right off. This is embarrassing. What's the one with Lady Gaga and Bradley
Star
Cooper?
is Born.
Star Was Born was a really big movie for me, right? Bradley Cooper could relate to him. Um, it's I got to be careful because sometimes I can get almost so deep in my thoughts that it can become dark. So really, those kinds of movies, those comedies, I enjoy a
Well,
comedy
you
every
can go
once in a
with
while.
those. Yeah.
I like movies like, yeah, well, I like movies like Toy Story too. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Those animated ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like those type. I don't know, funny movies. Old School's pretty funny.
Oh,
Old School.
that's funny. That
Will Ferrell.
yeah, this was probably a month ago now. Um, but my girlfriend and I were like, it was like a dinner and a movie night, and we were just like
Yeah.
on Netflix or whatever, trying to like find a
Yeah.
movie to watch. And I was like, oh, let's watch Old School. It's really funny. Like you'll like it. Da, da, da. And I don't know, probably the last time I watched it was in college, right? With like the three other
Yep.
guys you're living it with or whatever.
Yep.
And
Yep.
apparently Old School is definitely like a guy humor movie because I thought it was really funny and she did not think it was near as entertaining as I did.
Really? She'd never seen it before.
Um no, I mean if you're on the internet at all, there's clips of Old School all over the place.
Gotcha.
But it
Gotcha.
is
Gotcha.
I don't know. I've watched Old School and then you see all the funny things and
Yeah.
she's watching it and like, well, this doesn't make sense. And like, how does this like there's quite a bit of like if you're trying to make sense of
Yeah.
things chronologically, it makes no sense at all. But it's just
Yeah.
it's kind of like one long SNL skit, but
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah. Movies have changed a lot. My mom's one of her favorite actors is Charlie Chaplin.
oh yeah.
So do you guys ever watch those? There was
Yeah.
no talking.
Yeah.
It was just, I don't know what you
Yeah,
even, I don't, not educated on
Silent
that, right?
films,
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and the humor was so different back then on what was accepted, right? And today, I mean, you watch the cartoon Family Guy, and you got to be careful letting your kids watch some of that stuff.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's so different now. What people find funny, I find Old School
Yeah.
very funny. I think that kind of stuff. Very funny. Another show is, I'm drawing a blank on it too. It's one that Peaky Blinders.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, Peaky Blinders. That's my kind of stuff right there. It's gotta be a little bit. Maybe it's because of how I grew up. It's got to be a little bit of violence. Got to be a little, you know, kind of messing with people's heads. A little bit of dominate. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Peaky Blinders.
That's a
Yeah,
So
some of those movies you wonder what it would actually be like to be in the middle
that's
of
a
it.
great show.
yeah, no kidding. That was actually one of our earlier podcasts. Ben and I both had our Mount Rushmores of TV shows, and Peaky
Oh
Blinders was
yeah.
on my Mount Rushmore.
Yep.
But I did mention how, like I was catching up on it because I like started watching it like after the fourth season had come out, and I was just watching
Mhm.
all this Peaky Blinders like all at once, like an episode a night or something. and
Oh
that
yeah.
much Peaky Blinders
Is
all at
that wait?
once.
Whoa, wait, hey, Joe, an episode a night?
Yeah, I
It,
No, a
I'm
season a
yeah,
night.
I'm being
there you
pretty
Season,
go.
a
on.
season
I
a
Before
I
night.
try to
least.
stay disciplined about that. I have a very I have a personality that I can binge anything very easily, whether it's movies or alcohol, food, anything. I'm just
I
like
like
that
that
type of personality.
binge on
So I
alcohol.
try to
Yep,
stay
yep,
very
yep.
disciplined with my TV.
Gotcha,
Um,
gotcha.
but the problem is, however long the frequency, if you watch a bunch of Peaky Blinders all at once, at least for me, it just like wears on your psyche. Like I was having like violent dreams. I was waking up like
Yep, yep, yep. Another show that I caught myself when I was drinking alcohol, where I was really starting to drink a lot more, was that movie Mad Men,
Oh, yep.
or
Wow.
the TV show Mad Men.
I think we'd get along because that was also on my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, but I mean, every scene or whatever you call it, every time they turn the page to a new thing, their first thing they do is walk over to the whiskey bottle and pour another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every
And
time.
heaven forbid you were ever a smoker and then watch that show.
Oh gosh, yeah. Thank goodness I'm not that.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
exactly. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Though, but that was a different time because those guys were just like everything about that show to me was wild. Like being someone born in the '90s, and it was like, wow, this is what life was like, And
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
like running around on their wives, and they're like, well, it'll be okay. I'll just move like 20 minutes away and start a new life, and
yeah.
stuff that would never
Do you
happen
guys?
now.
A question for you guys. Do you guys ever feel like sometimes when I'm out in the hills, especially growing up in Ten Sleep, Wyoming, Worland, Ten Sleep, that Bighorn Basin area, a lot of cowboy history there, old school cowboy stuff, bank robber, type stuff. Uh, Indians up on the mountains. You go found a lot of arrowheads and Indian artifacts and all that. And growing up that way, I I always feel like in some ways that's when I should have been born, is to live. Your friend Robbie is picking on me. Is that is when I should have been born. He's ridiculous, you guys. That's when I should have been born and grew up in that time frame. Like that really fits me. You guys ever get that? You feel like you see like a 1950s car with the wings coming off the back, and you think, I should have grown up in the days of Greece or whatever. I
All the
don't know.
time, man.
I've
All the
definitely
time.
I don't know about the 1950s. Yeah. But definitely I feel like I'm born in the wrong time a couple times.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Do you, Ben? Do
60s
you feel that
through,
way?
yeah, I'm thinking mid 60s through the very late 70s. Like, I like a lot of time periods, but I
Yeah, there you
like
go.
that one, I think, the most.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I would have loved to,
My
like that
my
movie, Once Upon a Time in
yeah,
Hollywood. Man, I really loved that movie because I was like, that would have been fun to be with those guys.
yeah,
Just wild. But you had a little
yeah.
technology, cars and
Roland
stuff, but it was still pretty wild.
Roland Moore says that the heyday for the cowboy was in the 70s.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I don't know what that means exactly, but that's kind of when it was just a different time for the cowboy. And I think it was a lot of a transition period too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
interesting,
And that's
interesting.
when, I mean, wasn't that kind of when obviously I wasn't there, but like the rodeo and the NFR became something completely different than what it was prior to that too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of things. I think the idea of the cowboy too, just in general, people kind of wanting to be like them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the cowboys then they there was a lot more of them. There's cowboys out there now and cowgirls and that kind of thing, but there just isn't as many. And a lot of them, what's really, and I don't know, right? Because I'm not as hard as like my dad and my grandfather, and the way they started colts and the kinds of horses they rode and the jobs that they did, you know, the way I grew up in Wyoming, you still see some of that. So I got a couple of young guys that I work with there at Olson's, and they're in one of the feed yards, and one was like 22 years old, and they're out in New Mexico, and they're kind of tie hard, bat wing chap, right? I mean, they ride every day. They put hobbles around the throat latch of their horse.
Punch.
They have carabiners on the back D ring of their saddle. They have a big old carabiner snap. I asked them, what is that for? And they said, when you catch those wild cattle, you get them roped and you suck them really up close to your horse and you snap the rope into that snap so they can't swing out away from
Huh.
you. If they run into the horse, fine, but they can't get out away from you because those guys, I don't know if you see, they were telling me about it. Like they'll be on a rim rock deal off to the left, cow will be on their right, and they'll have another rider on their left pushing on their horse so that cow can't push the two of them off the cliff.
Yeah, I've seen some of
It's
those
a different
videos.
ball game down there.
Yeah. Like
Yeah, those
that
guys are
Bronx and
nuts.
Donks guy. That seems like the stuff he gets into.
Oh man, and that's another level of tough, man. That's another level
Yeah.
of tough. And but that level of tough sometimes I can appreciate that in a lot of ways. Um, I can appreciate it because there's a little bit of a spirit that's there that's kind of missing in some ways, uh, sometimes. And I don't want to do that very bad. And for lots of reasons, I don't want to do it, but I can appreciate that level of
Yeah.
tough for sure. For sure. We don't, you don't see that in a lot of the cowboys today.
It kind of fits in with older time periods as well. But I was going to ask you, have you seen that show Outer Range with Josh Brolin? It's on Amazon Prime. It's kind of a new thing they kicked out, and they did one season of it. You might like that. It's pretty dark,
I
but
haven't.
Josh Brolin plays a ranch owner, and he's got a couple of sons, and it's really wild. And there's like some
Oh,
time travel. There's like a little sci-fi in there, but it's a little bit dark. It's kind of
interesting.
gritty, and I thought he did all right. I mean,
I,
when they get like the Indian reservation right, and they get the town dynamics right, and there's a few things that are Hollywood, but for the most part, it's a little bit believable. And it was a pretty good show.
yeah.
Bill and we watched the whole thing in like 2 nights, I think.
Thank God for
Exactly.
technology.
Sit there and mind mush away.
Another, you guys, another TV show to me that's top of the list, Mount Rushmore TV show, is Deadwood.
Oh yeah,
Mm.
yeah. We started that. I
It's one of
gotta
my dad's
get
favorite
back into
shows of all
that.
time.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm not going to repeat any lines out of that movie, but that's a good or TV show. That's a good one. That's a good
Who's that guy? He's like kind of the main guy, and he's got the big
Swinton.
beard. Whoever that actor
Oh,
is,
the big dude.
he played like Blackbeard in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, but he's such a
Oh
good actor.
yeah.
I can't remember his name
I
now.
don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They call him. All I know him is Swearingen. He's the hotel owner. Is that what you're asking in Deadwood?
Yeah,
Swearingen. Swingen is what the Chinese call him.
yeah,
Swingen.
yep. No,
I don't.
Al Swearingen.
Yep.
Yeah. See, my technology being my crutch here, I can just
There you
figure
go.
it all
Just
out
Google it.
just like that.
I was I was just talking to somebody the other day. That's neat that you did that, right? And I mean, that's the beauty of technology. I was talking to somebody the other day. Nobody had their phones. We ate dinner, and a subject came up like that, right? And we actually had to sit there and ponder and figure out the answer.
Yeah.
And it's rare that that happens anymore because usually when something like that comes up, we Google it. And to me, a lot of that, getting back to that a little bit, a lot of that having to sit there and go through that, I appreciate you looking it up. And I'm not picking on you, but I'm just saying
No,
that's
no, I
another
agree.
example, right, of technology that those days of just sitting around the table and half an hour later, there it is. I remember right on the tip of my tongue. We don't have the tip of the tongue thing anymore. It's on the
No.
tip of my phone.
Yeah, I have a buddy from college who his take on it was that the smartphone was the death of all good bar conversation because you could be
Yeah.
bellied up with some regular
That's
there
funny.
and he'd just start
Yeah.
saying some BS thing, right? And like now you can be
That's
like,
really
"Oh,
funny.
look here, you old son of a gun. Like I just looked this up on my
Yeah.
phone and that's all complete crap."
Yep.
But,
Yep.
before the smartphone, you
Yep.
had to just sit there and you you're like, "That doesn't sound
Listen to
half
it.
right," but it could be. I don't
Yeah.
know any better, so that
Or there's no conversation. They're bellied up to the bar looking at their own phone, not talking to anybody.
yeah, exactly.
And I'm guilty, man. I'm like anybody else. I can look on Facebook, and the next thing you know, it's like, how did that much time go by? What is wrong with me? You
Yeah,
know, it's addicting, that's for sure.
Hey, Ricky, before we
absolutely.
let you go, so I gotta know, what are you doing down there in Texas? You hauled some horses down there, and are you guys showing or something? Or
Yep, yep. Federico, a friend of Robbie's, bought a bred mare from us. Um, Kind of really nice mare. She has a blind-sided baby in her belly, and then he bought two other 2-year-old fillies, and then a horse that I've been riding for a couple of years named Steve. Federico bought him, and so I'm down here at Robbie's place and brought those horses down, and then Robbie's going to ride. Well, I call him Steve. He's going to ride Steve, and Robbie's going to show him a little bit, and Federico's going to show him in the versatility stuff. So Robbie's going to help Federico with the transition of riding this horse and learning how to get into the show pen. I showed on him last year and did well in the versatility stuff, and so he's got some experience with it, and so that's kind of exciting. I've never made a horse like that, and then to have a guy like Robbie take him on with one of his cousins, it's just a wonderful transition. And then this weekend at my house this summer in July, Robbie came up. I've never really done this. I did this one time. Did Joel Connor tell you guys about the Ireland trip? Did you guys know that Joel goes to
I
Ireland as a
did,
weekend?
yeah, but I
So
haven't talked to him about
yeah,
it or
so he
anything.
goes, and that's okay. So how that started um, was I'd gone to Ireland for 9 or 10 years, and got a clinic going there with some friends. And Joel came along, just to go along, right? Just have fun and let's hang out at the pubs and have a
Oh
good
yeah,
time. That's a whole nother subject that we got to talk about sometime. But the he that first day I did the morning, and Joel was there, and I did the morning class, and then we broke for lunch and we come back in the afternoon class. And the gist of it was, is I was on the microphone and I told everybody, I've never done this before, you guys, but there's other people out there that have a lot to say also. And so Joel's going to take over for the afternoon. And I handed him the microphone, and he's like, I don't want to do this, right? I'm like, here, you need to. Gave him the microphone, and I just stepped back and I listened, and then he just talked about what he knew, and I just bounced around and helped him with people, to get to understand what he was talking about, and that was a lot of fun. And I hope that it was a little bit of a transition into him getting comfort into doing what he does today, right? To let him know that he had what it takes to do it, you know and he helps a lot of people now at the SAFE program there and outside of Seattle, and man, it's going on. He really helps a lot of people. Very, very proud of him and where he's headed with his thing. And then now Robbie, um, he's darn sure helped some people and teaching everything else, and what he has got a gift. Robbie's been a really big influence in my life of helping me start to understand myself more and how I present myself to somebody, because everybody loves Robbie. I mean, they love him so much it makes me want to throw up. Like, it's like there's this saying, if everybody liked me, I'm not sure I'd like myself, right? But I mean, he has a wonderful gift of getting along with people to where they really feel comfortable with him. So I've learned a lot from him. And so with that, we did a clinic at my house together this last July, and use my place. And there's quite a bit of country there to where we could go outside and ride and cattle stuff out there and arena stuff and just whatever we wanted. And so we just kept it to like 8 or 10 people, and we split them into two groups, and we just worked with, kind of bounced around and helped each other or split them up or did whatever. And people really, really enjoyed it. And so he's got this place that of Mike and Jennifer's down here in Weatherford, and he said, "Let's do one at my place." And so I brought all those horses down here to drop off, that we housed for him for like 3 months, fed him for free. My goodness, brought him down here, and then uh, we're going to do a class down here together. There's, I don't know, 8 or 10 people. We keep them really small, and we'll do flag work and cattle. Really, we're just here to help. So whatever anybody has on their mind and what they want to work on, right? And so that's what they're probably geared mostly towards the cattle side of things because we have them here, and that's an area a lot of people don't get a lot of time with in a clinic. Is it's hard to teach a cattle class in a clinic. It is so tough. And Robbie's got like 2 indoor arenas and a big outdoor, and the place is really set up to do a lot of different things. And so I don't know, I'm hoping I can present myself to the people well to where it's a good experience and it's fun.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing here this weekend.
Sounds good, man. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap her up. Man, this has been a lot of fun. This has really been fun with you.
Yeah. We appreciate the time.
I enjoy these and sharing. Yeah. Thank you guys very much for having me on and trusting me. Appreciate it.
You bet. Yeah. We'll have to circle back at some point. We'll slowly ease people into a full, 3-hour length podcast. You got to go easy on them. Keep them begging for more.
That's right. Perfect.
All righty.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, guys.
You bet. See you guys.